thought maybe we'd get started. We are expecting Tim Wandling to join us, but in the interest of keeping us relatively on schedule, I thought it might be good for us to get going. Welcome. And thank you so much for joining all of us for our second town hall meeting on budget. Just as way of some housekeeping, we plan to do another one of these in February, then in March, and then in April, and then in May. And we'll get those dates out on the email as those dates and places are identified. We're not doing one in January because the bulk of the student body is still on break, as are the faculty, so we'll wait until in early February. The format for today is I was going to turn first in a minute to Andy Merrifield to maybe reflect a little bit about the situation in the state legislature as it is unfolding, literally as we speak, and Andy will make some comments. Then I would talk a little bit about some of the status and progress report that we've made with some of the pending financial concerns, and you have a handout probably at your chair associated with that, and updates on where things are with the 8-9 budget, and then also reflect a little bit on some discussion we had in the President's Budget Advisory Committee this morning on the 9-10 planning. And if that all works, we should finish that up around by 12:20, 12:25 at the latest, we hope. And then the idea would be to turn the conversation into truly a dialogue among all of us in the room about brainstorming various ideas that we might be able to analyze about how we address the remaining financial concerns in 8-9 and begin to strategize about what we would think about for 9-10. So to generate ideas and solutions or strategies or initiatives or concepts that we might think about to move us forward through the year. So again, welcome. It's great to have everyone here. And let me turn perhaps first to Andy, if he would be kind enough to sort of highlight on what's going on in Sacramento and how it's affecting the budget scene.
Okay, I'll give you just, it's hard to call them highlights, but it is an update. As we predicted at the last town hall meeting, we didn't think that the first special session, which was the lame duck session after the election, was going to accomplish anything, and we were right, it didn't. And so the lame duck session of the previous legislature went out of business on November 30th, and the new session began on December 1st, and the governor immediately called it a special session, and it was what's known as he had two special sessions. One was what's known as a Proposition 58 special session, at which you can only discuss cuts, and the other was a normal special session, at which time you can also talk about revenues. They are running parallel. So they can talk about both. So far, nothing really has come of it, except that the Republicans finally, after simply saying no revenue or no taxes, no taxes, no taxes, did come up with a plan that they announced last week, and it is a plan that consists of some $22 billion all in cuts and borrowing. So in one sense, it's very typical of the budgets we've been seeing in the last 5 years under Governor Schwarzenegger, borrowing rather than tax increases. But this is more draconian because it's more difficult to borrow. They were suggesting borrowing primarily, essentially taking money from K-12, taking money from child health care programs and things like that by postponing certain programs, or in some cases taking money that is earmarked and shifting it to other priorities, and increasing certain revenues, they claim, by early collection and things of that nature. They're still saying that any tax increase will harm an already fragile economy. They are saying this is not ideological, this is sound and prudent practice. I was on another campus yesterday where another campus, not a chapter president, a campus president, referred to their thinking as obscene. Nonetheless, as it applies to the CSU and the UC, it's in very broad numbers. One of the things they were suggesting is direct cuts of about $264 million to both the UC and CSU. And that would look essentially like the cuts they are proposing already. But in addition, they want to increase the SFR for both campuses by enough that I think it's by 1 or 1.5, which would eliminate another $350 million from the two systems. The only thing that can be said at this point is that the proposal from the Republicans to the legislature is simply dead on arrival. None of the Democrats bought off on it. The Republicans are a rather substantial minority. So their proposal at this point has no traction in the legislature, but there's a caveat on that I'll get to in a moment. As Dan Condren reminded me, the Democrats are coming up with their sort of counter proposal at this point because they've had a number of proposals. And apparently they introduced it to the legislature a couple of hours ago. So that is being done today, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like. Everything I've heard is that the Democrats are not going to be enthusiastic about putting money back into higher education. As you know, they've already suggested that there may be even some postponement for K-12, but we'll know more about that probably by mid-afternoon. The Democrats also have something of an attitude of they are not going to move quickly on this because the only way they can move quickly is to go with the Republicans, which is all cuts, no taxes. The Democrats are saying they want about 50-50 cuts in taxes was their original proposal, which in reality comes out to about 3/4 cuts and 1/4 taxes, because remember, they've already taken cuts. So over the course of readjusting this year, if they now split it 50-50 and don't add all the cuts they've already made, in fact, it's more cuts than dollars. And there seems to be some belief in Sacramento that the real serious head-banging negotiations are not going to take place until we get closer to completely out of money. And we are not there yet, and we may not be there probably until February. So a solution may come before February, but it won't come. I would be pretty surprised if anything the Democrats proposed today got a solution before Christmas or before the new year. Which brings up the last point I want to make, and that is very likely means the 2008-2009 budget, which is the one we're dealing with now, will not be completed in Sacramento before January 9th. And on January 9th, the governor proposes his 2009-2010 budget, which means that instead of having to deal with one budget crisis that we thought we ended back in September and we haven't yet finished, we will have that budget crisis plus the 2009-2010, and I don't know of a soul in the state of California that 2009-2010 January budget that the governor proposes is going to be friendlier to the California State University than what's on the table now. So that's why I said there's no highlights, but those are some of the things that seem to be going on. And watch very closely for the news tonight, and we'll get a better sense of where the Democrats are.
Are there any questions for Andy on what's happening in Sacramento and the statewide scene?
Andy, have you heard that the Democrats are trying to, about their efforts to circumvent the 2/3 rule? That was.
Well, that's as a potential long-term.
Well, apparently they're trying some shenanigans actually right now.
Oh no, I'm not aware
Okay.
of what those shenanigans would be. No.
That's probably not the right word, shenanigans, by the way. Maneuvers, strategies.
If Willie Brown was still the Assembly Speaker, shenanigans would be the proper. We're giving Karen Bass.
Well then, moving along to provide some more updates, so some information of where some progress has been made on the campus since we last met in trying to identify some issues that are still facing us within the 8-9 year. Still, as Andy pointed out, being uncertain about what budget reductions could still hit us as issues work themselves through with whatever happens in Sacramento. But 2 weeks ago, as I think everyone in the room was aware, we went through our registration cycle, and it became clear at that time that as a direct result of planning for the mid-year budget reduction, the amount of course sections that were able to be put out there in the initial registration cycle made it difficult for all of our student body to get the necessary schedule of courses for the spring semester that they wished. And that was particularly the case for our sophomores and freshmen, and needless to say, became somewhat of a true crisis situation directly for our student body. At that time, the matter was discussed within the Academic Senate, I guess 2 weeks ago today, and literally on the Senate floor pretty much, and with the cooperation of all the senators and the student leadership and people from Student Affairs, Matthew Lopez Phillips, I think he might be in the room, Eduardo and I and others were able to put together a package where we have come forward to say that we're going to put out another $450,000 worth of money to add course sections for the spring semester. Eduardo then very quickly put together a team the next morning to figure out how that would happen, and a second registration cycle, or a modified first reg cycle was put in place. And I'm going to ask both Eduardo and then Derek and Nicolette to comment about how that was received, but in the sense, and that's why there's a line through it on your handout sheet, that we think that we have addressed the most serious issues associated with over-enrollment for the spring semester. You may be wondering where that money is coming from, $450,000, and the truth of the matter is we don't have a firm idea yet where that money will come from. Once we get into the spring semester and have our spring census, we'll be able to understand better the real implications of the over-enrollment in terms of the state university fee, and we're hopeful that there'll be some money there that will be greater than what we're anticipating that will help finance this. But if not, as I discussed in the President's Budget Advisory Committee this morning, and with the support of our President, we will finance that $450,000 to the degree necessary through an interfund borrowing. This is not the first time we did this. Back in 1995, in a similar difficult situation related to the budget, we borrowed from some of our self-support funds in order to mount the sections that we needed, and then we paid that back to the self-support funds over a period of 5 to 6 years. And we're preparing for that eventuality should that come, and I'll be able to report more on that in our town hall meeting probably in February or March once we see the census figures. But I've already had some conversations with the Associated Students Incorporated and the Sonoma State Enterprise Board of Directors about their willingness to help support this, and both of those boards have indicated a willingness to be supportive if the need arises. Eduardo, do you want to make any comments about how the funds went out?
Sure. Well, the way we went about it was the schools already had a set of courses that were being held as shadow sections. If it had turned out that the mid-year cuts weren't going to be applied to the CSU, which was a possibility that we thought might happen. And so they were already there, ready to be staffed if the money was available. So we scanned through those courses and we identified the ones that would meet the specific shortfall that we were experiencing at the lower division. And so in a sort of a situation room type of meeting, with the deans and our staff, we were able to quickly estimate the amount of FTEs that those courses would provide, as well as what it would cost to staff them. And so that was the estimate that we went to Larry with and got funded. We added a little extra margin to the direct cost of what was put out for this last additional registration period, because we could see that the FTEs, which is about in the mid-200s of these courses, was still short of what we knew was the potential demand at the end of, when all is said and done for spring. So we may have to add a few more classes during a second registration, and that's what that's going to be aimed at. But we were able to put it together pretty quickly, and judging by the volume of calls that we're getting, it seems like the crisis was addressed satisfactorily at this point.
Thank you, Eduardo. Derek and Nicolette, can you comment at all about what you're hearing on the ground from students, if anything, about how they're feeling now about the schedule, or is the tension lower, or if you can maybe just from anecdote, perhaps what you're sensing out there from the student perspective?
I would definitely say that the tension is a lot lower. I'm sure finals week has a lot to do with that right now, because that's very present on the mind of students. But right after registration, there was a lot of frustration with the whole process and how the amount of classes being offered. but that has definitely, the $450,000 has definitely helped, and I know that specifically the freshman class was really hurting by it and worried about their financial aid packages, and I'm hearing a lot less of it, just in general, so.
I would echo that. I think students are just, they feel reassured that the campus is taking care of them, that they're not going to be left out in the cold, no classes, no housing, no financial aid. And I think the campus is doing the best they can to inform the students about the process and help them understand step by step what needs to take place. And I think that definitely alleviated a lot of the frustrations and the concern and the tension. So.
Thank you both. John?
I have a question. Has this been about 90 sections, and are they mostly GE classes that we added?
I'm going to defer that one to Eduardo.
They are mostly GE classes. What was the first part of the
Is
question?
it about 90 sections then, 450,000? Is that?
I think it was a few more than that. I can't remember the exact number.
Or maybe 100 sections that we needed to add?
No. Oh, sorry, you said 90?
Yes.
No, it wasn't 90. Do you remember the number, Lori?
Let's see, it would have been, closer to
30
30.
to
More in
40.
the neighborhood of 30 sections, because that amount also included fringe benefits. And a number of the sections that were launched were fairly powerful in terms of the enrollments that they had to offer. But I think it was probably closer to 30.
Okay, good, thank you. In addition to that one, a week ago today, I believe, or a week ago tomorrow, last Friday, the Student Union Board of Directors met and finalized their budget for 8-9. They were in a deficit position, a projected operating deficit position with a negative fund balance. But the board took action last Friday to bring their budget into balance. And they did that through the cooperation of the Student Affairs Division and the Administration and Finance Division, as well as the Student Union leadership itself. That budget is in balance for this year with a variety of ways. Just to bring you up to date, some of the creative thoughts that we've been having. The employees of the Student Union Corporation are moving to university employment on a reimbursed basis, which eliminates a post-retirement health care benefit liability for the Student Union Corporation, which was a significant contributing factor to the operating deficit within the student union. So that action is underway. And second, through a variety of salary savings initiatives, resources are being provided to the student union from the administrative part of the university to keep that program in operation in a solvent fashion through the 8-9 year. And that's been done through a sacrifice from one end of the university to another end of the university to try to keep this very vital student program in place. And want to particularly acknowledge the leadership of the student body within the Student Union Corporation, along with the Vice President for Student Affairs and Neil Markley and Peter Neville for all of their efforts in bringing this matter to a successful conclusion. So I don't think the campus, from the Student Union perspective, is going to see a major change or disruption of service, but I do think some aspects of other parts of the university might be sacrificing a little bit more because of the inability to fill certain positions on that part. But it's a reflection of the higher priority of the student union program versus some other parts of the institution in the administration. In a similar fashion, the athletics deficit that we were projecting in 8-9 is more or less resolved. Would like to acknowledge especially the hard work of Tandy Whitaker, who we brought out of retirement to work with Bill Fusco and all of our coaches to try to come up with a way that we could balance that budget. And we're doing that, at least for 8-9, with a variety of salary savings from, again, administrative and staff and physical plant positions throughout the university, redirecting those dollars to support our instructional and academic support programs in athletics. We still are worrying about our scholarships in athletics, but that's a remaining challenge. Looking forward on the pending financial concern issue, I'll call your attention to two that are kind of moving up to the center stage for need to be addressed. The first one, and I hope to be able to report on this, how we solve it, in February. We'll try to solve it before February, but we'll report on it before then. The first one is in the area of grants and contracts. We have a variety of grants and contracts on the campus. They generate something called indirect cost recovery, which is used to support expenses within the grants and contracts program that we are unable to charge directly to the grant. And the unfortunate thing is that we don't generate enough indirect cost recovery to cover all the expenses associated with those grants that we're not able to charge directly to the grant. It's presenting issues within our NASA program in the School of Science and Technology, within our Anthropological Studies Center, within the School of Social Sciences. Those are two areas that are of concern. I know, I see Mary is in the room, and she has written me and Eduardo in the last 24 hours expressing concern about this issue. We don't have a solution yet for it, but we'll try to have that shored up in the very near future, because clearly it's something that needs to be addressed. The other area that's high on the priority list at the moment has to do with the liquidity of the SSU Academic Foundation. Like all philanthropic organizations in America, educational endowments, ours is no exception. It has taken a loss of about 25% of its value since June 30th of 2008. That translates into about $8 or $9 million of money that we lost on paper because of the change in the financial markets. And what that does is make it difficult for us to make a distribution of earnings from that endowment for our academic programs. And that will have a particular effect, if that doesn't get made, for our School of Science and Technology, for our School of Arts and Humanities and the Person Fund, for our School of Arts and Humanities for the Chair of Native American Studies, certain programs in the School of Business Economics and the Schultz Endowment. All of these, and there are a variety of other smaller endowments that exist, as well as a whole myriad of student scholarships that are funded through endowed funds. And so that is a very big challenge that we need to start to get under control for the 9-10 fiscal year. Because the programs, as Dean Butler or Dean Bebule, I think I saw Bill in the room, can easily speak to, these dollars have become essential to the operation of those issues, and if we're unable to find them from the performance of the endowment, we really do need to try to find them in some other way, otherwise it amounts to another budget reduction. Patricia and I have been discussing this, along with Ian and Letitia and others, Bill Ingalls, with the Foundation Board's Finance Committee, and we had a briefing with them on the full board. Patricia briefed us earlier today that the CSU system is putting a special conference call together early in January to talk about how other campuses, all of whom are in this same situation, will attempt to address this issue. But we really want to give some reassurance, I think, in this budget planning cycle about how we'll address issues associated with the foundation. So in the grants and contracts area and the foundation are the two next big issues to try to tackle. And hopefully when we get back together in February, we might have a better answer for what's going on there. The reason for the delay, not to be mysterious, but we are very anxious, coming back to Andy's opening remarks, to see what the governor is going to do on January 9th, because that's going to really set the stage for what the legislative battles will be in the spring. And that, of course, has an impact on what kinds of resources we have and how we can redirect them. If you flip over the page to the other thing, there's some risk. I hate to put this out right before we break for the semester, because it is a little depressing. It's not the best, but I thought in order to get the brainstorming discussion on our way, we should perhaps have some estimate or some idea of what 9-10 might look like in the operating budget. And we can have a great debate on the numbers, but this is kind of what, from my office, we're kind of thinking 9-10 could look like. You all remember that we had the budget cut of $31 million, our share of the $31 million, which turned out to be $711,000. We took that on a one-time basis just this past October. It's my sense that that will become a permanent reduction in the 9-10 year. So we start with that. And then there's this discussion about the $66 million that's been talked about in the special sessions for CSU. Our share of that is about $1,389,000. All bets that I'm hearing from the people that talk about these things, so that will probably be in the governor's budget on January 9th as a permanent reduction to the CSU. So I pretend that one is there. And then we know from from the trustees' proposed budget that even without any new money from the state of California in 9-10, there will be certain mandatory costs that we will have to absorb no matter what. And those mandatory costs are largely in the area of energy. They are in the areas of new space, but most significantly, they are in the area of healthcare premium increases for our employees, both for healthcare, vision, and dental. And then there is help me, Andy, with what it is, the performance.
PPI.
The PPI.
Post-promotion increase.
Yeah. This will be the third year of that in 9-10, because we had one in 7-8, one in 8-9, and then one in 9-10, and we must honor that contractual obligation to faculty. So I just sort of guessed, taking a look at what these mandatory costs totaled the current year, the one that we're in, after we had a fee increase, and I made an assumption that there would be, again, a 10% fee increase that the trustees would approve. They have not approved that, but I just speculated that they might. And so I took the value of that fee increase and I netted it against the new mandatory costs and came out with a shortfall of $1,043,000. It's a rough guess. It might not be true, but at least it's a starting point because I thought we needed to have something. So looking at that, it would mean that sitting here today, we could be looking at, and more than likely will be looking like a $3 million, $3.2 million, something in that neighborhood budget reduction of a permanent nature in the 9-10 year. And then if we were to display it just across in some kind of a fashion for division planning, this is based on the share of the campus budget. As you can see there, those percentages, these are the kinds of monies that would go out to the divisions for planning purposes to get us to the 3.1 million. It assumes that this projection assumes there would be nothing provided beyond the PPI program, and all of our unions are in reopeners with collective bargaining process. There could be something that would come to PAC and compensation. That would be on top of this number. But it also there's also been some discussions that I've heard that the fee increase might be greater than 10%. That's what I'm hearing from this. But that would cause lots of issues from the student perspective, so factor that into your thinking. But at least as maybe a starting point, I think SSU should be planning for a $3 million reduction for the 9-10 year of a permanent nature. And we won't be over-enrolled. We're not allowed to be significantly over-enrolled next year, so Eduardo and Matthew and along with the deans, are trying to bring our target enrollment in at the 7,500 number as opposed to being over-enrolled as we are in the current year. So with that bleak news, yes, Michelle.
I want to be really clear. We've had one budget cut already this year. There's another one that's coming. You're projecting that those are both permanent.
Yes, in 9-10.
Okay, so not this year.
I'm still thinking we've already taken care of the 31 for this year one time, and I'm hoping that the vice presidents are all holding their fair share of the $66 million if and when it comes. I know Academic Affairs is counting on the over-enrollment money to handle theirs, but the other operating divisions should be holding this magnitude for the spring. And then it will become permanent in the summer.
So when you're talking 9-10, you're talking fiscal year.
Yes.
But fiscal year 9-10 doesn't start until July 1st.
That's correct.
Okay, so these dollars would come out in the spring or not until?
The one-time reduction, if it happens, we would take from this year's budget as a one-time basis, and then we would make it permanent when we open the budget year in 9-10.
Thank you. So it's not 3 cuts?
No.
Okay.
But some units will handle it differently. Some people will handle the 8-9 cut with one-time money, which is what Academic Affairs largely will do. But then when they get to 9-10, they're going to have to find a permanent cut way to handle that, and that's a little different. For the non-academic areas, most of us will take it permanently in the current year. So I thought it would be good, and we had a little planning preliminary meeting yesterday around this same time to figure out how we want to do this. The town halls are really to generate ideas about how we can address $3 million. What would Sonoma State University's response be? What kind of steps would we want to take to try to address these issues? And we all thought it would be a good idea to sort of brainstorm that here, not necessarily come up with why it can't be done, but just identify some ideas. And then the financial staff, this group, others, would do some analysis over the holiday break. When we get back together in February, we can take a look and say, well, this one wouldn't work, or maybe we could do this one, and here's an idea that, I just threw out, and we did this once before. It didn't generate tremendous savings, but we did do it. We made the decision to not be open full 5 days a week in the summer. We went to a 4-day, 10-hour-a-week schedule in the summertime, and it allowed us, in theory, to shut down the campus for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and the idea was to save air conditioning and utility bills. It was an idea. I just throw that out as an example. There are many other things that people might think about, but I think that's what we'd all be want to do now, is just to open this up to see if there are ideas that we should analyze to figure out how best to prepare for what likely will be a fairly serious hit. Well, I'll start.
They're just soaking it in, Larry.
I've said to my own management team, the people that I work with directly, most of the time, and they're a little distressed with me, but as positions become vacant, I've asked them to not fill them. Or if we have to fill them, I've recommended that we not fill them on a permanent basis, that we open the searches as temporary appointments, so that we would be in a flexible position to respond to budget reductions. Of course, what that means is you have to either stop, if you don't fill the position, you must stop doing that work, perhaps not do that job anymore, if that's possible. Is that something that can be done? Or can you shift that work to some other part of the university or to some other person? And that has implications then for that person, because they get all this extra work, so what do they do? So in a nutshell, I'm saying, is there something that we're currently doing that we don't have to do, or can we do it in a different way? Yes, Bruce?
Well, maybe we can work more towards offices becoming paperless.
So would someone make, Barbara, were you going to try to capture them? If you can, thank you, Barbara. Moving to more of a paperless office is the concept, to reduce operating expenses would be the idea. Jim?
I don't know how much money it would save, but I suspect that since we've been mandated a year-round operation, we spend a certain amount of our annual budget teaching courses that traditionally, before it was sold to the state legislature, that we could increase capacity by teaching regular sessions in the summer. We taught those courses through extended ed, and the students paid essentially the same amount or less to take the same number of units through extended ed. And we have trouble mounting courses during the summer through YRO because we have to keep them in a cost-effective basis in comparison to a regular semester. So is there any chance that rationality may hit the chancellor and decide that campuses that are not in a position to run economically during the summer for YRO can roll that money into funding regular semester instruction that we can run more efficiently and return to teaching our summer school offerings through extended ed?
Okay. So the idea is to temporarily suspend year-round operations.
We certainly don't need to expand our capacity into the summer session.
That would be one that probably Eduardo would want to analyze, but let's put it on the list. Susan?
Well, mine's a little bit longer range, but maybe if it's permanent, it would fit on that one to get your thinking. I feel that the way that we fill the dorms is not maybe the most effective way, because it's primarily freshmen. And freshmen, what, about 40% do a remedial, and statewide is about 40%, I don't know what we are here. And that's expensive. And we do believe in small classes for freshmen, which is expensive. And so if we devoted more of our dorm space, guaranteeing that it's filled, that's your problem, to upper division students, transfer students, maybe to say if you transfer from out of the region, since we have to be regional now, say if you transfer from out of the region, the first year you live in the dorms. If you're not local, might be a way
So the idea would be to increase the percentage of sophomores, juniors, and seniors in residence as opposed to freshmen.
And take students accordingly. I mean, that's just a nice way of
Okay.
telling A&R how to do their job.
Okay. I think Eduardo's gonna, are you gonna respond to that one, or do you have an idea?
No, I have a suggestion.
Okay, I'm coming to you, because I think,
I saw Meredith.
I see Deb.
Deb.
And Meredith? Oh, well, let's go to Deb. Thank you,
Like
'cause I don't
the
remember the names.
Brownsville, and if any department wants to adopt a university and take care of it, it's fine, but, no new plantings, perhaps, I don't know about watering, I don't know how much that costs, but, other than basic maintenance or something like the Brownsville. And another idea I have is not allowing students to take the course until this is over.
Hmm.
So students who want to retake the course and get a higher grade than to get into a program.
So Barb, the first one was to, I'm going to sort of paraphrase the idea, is to maintain the landscape only at the most minimum level for safety. And the second one was not to permit a student to retake a course for a higher grade until the fiscal crisis had passed.
And don't forget having units adopt the lawns. I like that idea.
Say it again, Tim?
She suggested that maybe buildings or units could adopt the lawns near them or something.
That's, it's the idea is like the adopt a highway. It could be that the accounting department adopts this quadrangle area and they help maintain it in light of the issue. Meredith, and then Eduardo.
Greatly increase our recruitment of international students, which will work towards diversification, which we've been talking about anyway, and they pay a lot more money to come here.
Okay, so greatly increase the number of international students that we have on the campus. Eduardo?
This was something I found out about yesterday at the Academic Council of the CSU. Cal State East Bay is starting in the fall, I believe it's the fall, with online math remediation course that is going to be available to anyone at the CSU. And so they are encouraging campuses that are having trouble containing their enrollment growth, that they might want to direct some of the remediation FTEs toward that campus, helping them with their target, taking pressure off our target, and creating more room for the actual, baccalaureate courses as opposed to the remediation courses.
So the idea is to move or pilot remediation online? Or
Yeah, well, to reroute our remediation students to these online courses.
Okay.
And then we wouldn't have to mount these more expensive courses, and it would help with our cost structure here.
Got it. There was another hand, Susan.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that we open up upper division of general education and allow students to link courses outside their major, create a kind of mini minor, but to allow those to count for upper division GEs. So it would be function kind of like our IPDS major does now, but it would open up the option and the range of courses.
And I'd like to make that suggestion permanent.
I had another suggestion too.
Okay, but Barbara, did you get that? She did. Okay, thank you.
And my other suggestion is to turn that property we own into a soccer field or athletic playing field and rent it out during the year.
The faculty housing one? That property? Which property?
International teams.
Yeah, I think that's what she means.
Okay. Did you get that one? There's another proposal, Susan, not to turn it into a soccer field. I understand from Dan, whereas Dan Condra, that there's a farmer that is interested in leasing it to farm it. But that's, you mean, any kind of way to turn it into an income-producing thing?
Well, I was thinking athletic events would bring potential students here.
Yep, okay. That's a good idea. Bruce?
This would be system-wide and very controversial, but we could use SAT and ACT scores to replace and eliminate EPT, ELM.
So use SAT and ACT in place of
In place of the EPT and the ELM, which is
EPT and ALM. Okay. We got it down? I have one. It's controversial, maybe. In one of the early budget crises, we went from 40 custodians to 20 custodians. And when we did that, we moved from the evening shift to the night shift. We could go further down as custodians retire. I'm not saying to lay them off, but we could reduce some of these services, and the cleanliness of the campus would go down. We would clean maybe just 3 days a week rather than 5 days a week. So we could put that on the piece of paper. Susan?
Could you supply buildings with vacuum cleaners, then we're already cleaning our own offices.
We-
I'm not just joking.
No, I know, there was a time when, in the financial area, we vacuumed every Friday. Someone got assigned the task, Tandy will remember it. So it's not a bad idea. We could supply those vacuums in some kind of a central way. John?
I would go further about the land. I suggest we sell it. And I think, given the crash in housing prices and so on, we're not facing that great need for the university to be in the housing business for faculty. If we could get $3 million, that would tide us over.
Okay. The suggestion is to sell the land that we purchased for faculty staff housing. Dan?
Larry, you mentioned earlier the 4-day week, 10 hours a day. A variation on that theme is a 9-day fortnight. So every other Friday off, work 9 hours a day. So you add up 80 hours in 9 days.
Okay. I think Barbie got it. Okay, good. An idea that came up, I forget who, I think it was Susan, or it might have been Tim. Someone in the budget committee this morning asked if we can take a look at our debt and see if it can be refinanced at lower interest rates. So we should maybe put that on our list to see if that would generate any resources.
But I'll put in a couple. I think just working with extended education in all ways possible to increase the volume of, I think, I agree with Jim's suggestion about YRO, but build that up, because they need to make they're going to have budget impacts too, and so we want them to be strong and healthy, and to take the overflow of students that we can't serve on statewide. So I think really supporting extended education in every way possible is key. And second is just service and volunteerism and making that count and noticing it. If you're just vacuuming a room by yourself and feeling kind of bitter about that, that's one thing. But if your whole building is taking responsibility for that, it has a way of sort of recognizing it and validating that work. If people are going to volunteer to teach, I think anybody who can teach should look about whether they can teach in their specialization, even if they're not a teacher right now, and see about doing that. And those who can do other kinds of work, even janitorial work if you want to do, let's just make it count and visible so that it doesn't become just unnoticed work.
Andy?
Well, a couple of things. One is that now is the time to continue to unite the students and the employees of the university as a voice in Sacramento and with the governor's office. I strongly encourage the students, when they are notifying the governor and the Big Five, or the Big Four at this point, about the lack of budgetary progress and the importance of the CSU, that you bring your parents into it. In other words, we are a force. We have 450,000 students in the CSU. We have hundreds of thousands of parents. We have over 100,000 employees, and this is something we can do now. Unfortunately, the governor and the legislature does not listen very much to the employees of the university, but they do listen to the students, and they do listen to the students' parents. And the Alliance for the CSU, which was formed in January, is still alive. If you have not signed up, you should do so. If your students have not signed up, you should do so. If your parents have not signed up, they should do so. I mean, we need a concerted effort by everybody who is interested in keeping this place solvent. We all know the issues, right? Every dollar spent generates 4, and that's not a nonsense number, and that's something that we all agree to. So one of the things we can do is to keep pounding on the legislature. Some of us just write us off as another interest group, but I think we're more important than that. And don't be ashamed of lobbying and participating in the political process. It can be done honorably, too.
John?
hesitate somewhat to make these remarks, but when people speak about doing our own vacuuming and maintaining the grounds and so on, I worry that we're proving to the public and the state legislature that we really don't need that money. And why can't we police our own grounds and so on? And I think that's not professional. And in fact, I suspect that about those highway signs, I've never seen that Martin Levy out there cleaning the highways. I suspect he pays money to support a Caltrans crew who knows how to do it safely. And I think the same is true about taking care of our campus, that we're naive to think that we're going to go out there and do that. It would come down to taking money out of our pockets, giving it to hire professionals to do those things. I suspect our liability wouldn't even, our insurance wouldn't let us do some of those things, but I'm really worried that we prove that we don't need funds. If we volunteer to teach, then why pay us? That seems to me that's not the message we want to. I understand the motives, and I share the motives, but I worry about that.
Can I follow
think,
up on that?
Okay, Andy. Yeah.
There is one other issue about volunteerism in any form. Remember, if we are faculty, we don't want to take work from the people who do the work on the grounds. We don't want to take work from the custodial staff. We don't want to take, by volunteering, volunteers in the classroom make sense under certain conditions. But partially it's John's concern, partially it's also, let's be clear. Custodians do a really good job considering the amount of resources they have. They do a better job than we will. Okay, so it's not only and that's their livelihood. So let's not say, well, anybody can do that. They do a great job, and we need to do that. I understand Larry's position, and maybe by attrition, et cetera, but let's not be taking work. I think that's an important thing. One of the reasons why we work as an entity together is we respect what each other do, and we respect that our colleagues who, the student service professionals do certain things that the faculty can't do. And we could say, well, gee, we could reduce the amount of advising they get over there, and the faculty could pick it up. That would be bad for them, that would be bad for us, and it'd be really bad for the students. So some of this stuff, we have to recognize we're not all, this is a complex organization, we all have specialties. And yes, we can overlap, and yes, we can help, and I certainly agree with service and volunteering in the community is a fundamental part of what we do, but not volunteering to take work from our colleagues.
Ian, and then Susan.
Well, my thought was most of these comments are based on reducing expenses, reducing costs around the campus, but the other side is to find ways to increase revenue generation through increase in programs or services. Tim mentioned extended education as a place to possibly expand revenue sources, maybe raise fees on things from parking or food or whatever it may be, or increase philanthropic activity to try and bring in more money, just in essence, instead of cutting costs, to bring in more money if possible as well.
So maximize revenue opportunities. Susan?
Yeah, quick about vacuuming. We stopped having anybody clean our offices about 15 years ago, so we've been vacuuming for a long time. I hear what you say. Some time ago, there was a plan to encourage people to go from 12 to 10-month contracts, some kind of voluntary furlough plan that would respond to a similar crisis, but not a specific. And I'm wondering if such a plan, voluntary furloughs or reducing one's contract has been discussed, so long as it doesn't compromise essential services. And I noticed in the paper yesterday, Agilent is rolling back its salaries by 10% for non-union members. So I'm wondering if there's any statewide talk about that.
On the first one, I think the idea is to, I don't know how to say it nicely, but to encourage or to make available opportunities for folks who want to go to a 10-month appointment from the 12. if that's possible, or to somehow reduce their time base in a voluntary way during this difficult time. And the second one was pay reductions for non-managerial employees is the idea. Pay reductions for managerial employees. I'm sorry, I did it wrong.
Larry, can I make another comment?
Yes, of course.
I like the distinction that Ian just made, and also I think the comments that John made about volunteerism are interesting, because we could categorize these into revenue enhancements versus dealing with revenue cuts as two broad categories. But then also in dealing with the revenue cuts, or the cuts to our budget, short-term solutions like volunteering and volunteer teaching, and like this is just something that needs to be done right now. We've got to take care of this need. That's one set of solutions, but they're not long-term sustainable, and I think John's right, they're also not professional in a way. But still, there's things that we need to get done just when you need to get them done, and I think we need to rally around and get those things done. But we can't make that part of our permanent base budget, but neither can we have, I think, our lawn be uncared for the next 10 years. It's like, maybe we do that as an emergency situation, but I think a nice looking campus is also important. So there's short-term, like drastic solutions, and then there's how do we do it sustainably and long-term to figure those both out.
I have one to put on the table. There are a variety of system-wide information technology initiatives that are being discussed. One of them is to move to a common e-management system, learning management system. One of them is to move to a common email system that would be system-wide procured. And I would say we should analyze whether or not the university should, how actively we want to participate in these system-wide initiatives to see whether there's some cost savings that can be generated. We already are trying to do one in the common financial system, which we're trying to roll out, which would reduce cost here in financial management, but be an idea. Another idea that comes to my mind, and oftentimes when you find yourself personally in a financial challenge, you figure out a way to bridge it in the hope that better days are ahead. So rather than really ripping something apart, you figure out a way to keep it afloat until such time that the recovery comes, as a way to strategize to keep some of the core functions operational. Yes?
I just want to make sure that all students who qualify for work-study get work-study jobs. That priority for student jobs for the work-study recipients as opposed to non-work-study recipients.
Okay.
It's cheaper for the university.
Sure.
It's more important for the students who qualify for work-study.
So maximize the work-study opportunity.
Use every penny of that work-study money that we get.
And along those lines, when we have a staff position, which we might not want to, gets into a little bit of trouble with our unions, but I'll say it anyway, when we have a position which we're going to kill or temporarily suspend because of budget, perhaps refill that with a student appointment. But it does get into some issues with our collective bargaining agreements. But oftentimes you can find the student labor that will be less expensive than the staff labor, but it creates a student job. But it does have, well, I'm getting into the analysis. It was just my idea. I'm not supposed to do the analysis in brainstorming. Others, Eduardo.
Well, seeing as a couple of campuses have already gone to outsourcing their email system, we might want to look into the possibility of moving on that without waiting until the CSU comes up with a standardized approach to it, to get an immediate cost savings from it.
Here's a very controversial one. Maybe it's not controversial. I'll just say it. Many campuses have moved into charging their students for use of the credit card when they use the credit card to pay their tuition. For many, many years, this university has resisted that convenience fee, and we don't charge that now. Or for CashNet, when students pay for a variety of things, oftentimes you have to pay a little charge. We would perhaps eliminate that thing. It represents a new fee to a student for the convenience. They don't have to pay it if they pay in cash, but if they choose to pay in credit card, you can assess a fee. It's a convenience fee. That's an idea. Michelle?
I'd like to piggyback off of what Ian said. Philanthropy has not dried up. This morning we just received a $3,000 gift for astronomy and physics. And I think it's really, really important right now that we share with the community all the great things that this university is doing, and that programs and departments and schools continue to make friends with people in the community. They read the papers, they know what's going on. We don't have to cry poor. In fact, we should not be crying poor with donors, but and I think that the more they know, the more they're going to want to donate to the fabulous things that are going on at this university. So partnering with the University Development Office to formulate those partnerships with community, with businesses, and with individuals, I think is going to be increasingly important, because the sense that I'm getting is that these cuts are not going to go away anytime soon. We're not going to get any new money from the state for a long time. And we do need to look at ways of generating money, and one of the ways is with the community, and we have a wealthy, friendly community. So I think that that's an area that we could focus on a lot more.
Good observation. Susan?
Yeah, to follow up on that, I think we do need to think about what 21st century solutions are going to be, and this crisis is making us look at the way we do business, maybe from a new perspective. And there's a lot of money out there for sustainability aspects, whether it's curriculum or investment in infrastructure, and we ought to perhaps target that as an area of immediate interest for philanthropy.
Andy?
Well, not only for philanthropy. I mean, the thing is that we're going to be moving towards a more environmentally friendly economy. We have to, because it can't be as bad and hostile as it is at the national level, and it has trickled down. So that's going to happen. And one of the things that we should be looking at as a CSU and as a Sonoma State, because we already have a great jump, is to work it into our curriculum. Because right now, a lot of the economics around the environmental economy, and a lot of the changes, junior college to train technicians, the UC graduate schools to train those folks. But the reality is, to have a sustainable, environmentally friendly economy, we are going to need a middle class, and that's what the CSU provides. And if you look at what some of the community colleges in this area are doing, they're getting huge grants to set up programs and things like that. And I know this is something that has to go through and must go through all the academic kind of stuff. But we can start thinking about not just how do we put sustainability into our current curriculum, but how do we build our curriculum to train the people for the 21st century, not as the technicians, but as the solid, the people that we are training now, to adjust to that. Because there are lots of ways that we can do that, and there may be bridge opportunities because there's going to be money available.
Tim?
I think that PR, Susan's job, is just probably one of the most important jobs, because as I'm sitting here listening to these ideas, I think, well, how do you play them out? I was, do you want to play out volunteerism? Do you want, if you want to have professors in regalia, doing doing the yard work, that would be an interesting story from one point of view. But it would be kind of playing poor. It would be playing poor from the other point of view, and unprofessional other points of view. So thinking about the PR consequences of how we do things, and really vetting that through you and Dan, and just thinking, what are the stories that we want to be telling about what's happening here and how we're dealing with it, I think is just a big part of our problem right now, or we need to do.
Susan?
Is there any chance of readjusting the focus of the development office a little more? This has been very focused toward a major project. And perhaps if, I don't know, we were stretching out, borrowing to stretch out a lot of stuff, possibly we stretch out the efforts in development a little bit to have more development in academia beyond that focus. And, for instance, the science, because my goodness, science is enormously expensive and needs to be, a lot of people need that education to get out. So I think if you looked at what you could readjust, I know you can't take it away, but readjust might be useful.
Add that one to the list. I have one that I'd like to add, and that is to explore with the CSU the possibility of a early retirement / golden handshake program. We had those in the past budget crises. I don't know where that stands at the moment, but take a look at that. Oh, lots of hands. Let's go to Jim, Mary. Jim and Mary.
Just on that last point, if that's anticipated, given the fact that even with enrollment constraints, many departments are struggling with very large percentages of temporary faculty for instruction, it might be important to have it coupled with guarantees of replacement hires in the tenure track line.
I understand, Jim, yes. Mary? Did you get it here, Barb? Allow employees to take unpaid leave? Andy? Yes.
When we're discussing the lack of funding for extra courses to offer, have there ever been any discussion as to, instead of actually increasing the number of courses, to actually utilize the space better, more efficiently, to pack more people into larger spaces? That would free up some of the resources that would be associated with hiring on extra either instructors or faculty or staff.
Right, I mean, that, we have to keep reminding the community, because the community is interested in the students, as we all are. And the reason we don't mention the students in every sentence is because it's always in the back of our heads that it's about the students. But when we do talk to the community, make sure that they understand we're not talking about jobs for the people who work at Sonoma State University. We're talking about students. And, we don't have to tell ourselves that, but we do when we step off the campus, because that's what they want to hear and that's what they should hear. And since we assume it, but we can't assume it when we are talking to the greater public. And so always concentrate on, Susan McKillop's idea about it, science labs are expensive, but students need science labs, right? I mean, and that's the start and the end of all of our discussions with the greater community. It's also honest, but it's really necessary that we remember that.
Other ideas? Yes.
Not everybody comes to these, obviously. I'm wondering if there's a way or a suggestion. What is the idea for people who don't come here who have ideas that we're not capturing? Is there a place they should send them or talk to someone in particular?
We're all looking into a camera that's at us, so I think this is being streamed somewhere. Susan, can you answer that?
We have a website that we have on the homepage right now. You can click on it, go to the website where it lists all these town hall meetings. And Bill is videotaping all of them, so they'll be on the YouTube channel. We'll be able to put them there. And we can also send something out saying, here's what we did, and if you have suggestions, submit it.
Another idea that I would like to put on the table, and it's on the administrative side, is to try to partner with other campuses to synergize and reduce administrative expenses. Does every campus need to have an internal auditor, or can we share Brian with someone else and get paid for it, as an example? Susan.
Yeah, our Senate budget meeting, we were talking about alternative currency exchanges, and I was thinking as we want to scale back on some of our workforce, perhaps there's things we have to offer professionals in the community to come in, like groundskeepers, for instance, in exchange for using the swimming pool with treatment work, or whatever kinds of alternative exchange things we have tickets to that either arts productions or whatever, in exchange for work by people who have services that we can benefit from. And alumni are put in that category too. A lot of alumni are willing to come back because they have a great commitment and feeling for this institution and offer what they've done for so many years so very well.
Good idea. I just came from a meeting on intercollegiate athletics on that question, and they call that, Susan, the concept of trades. It's you trade out stuff. You give them something. It's not money, though. They give you something, you give them, and it works out.
Derek?
Maybe even possibly working closer with the JC to where we can have our lower division students take courses there, so we can have open more upper division courses here.
Greater collaboration with the
Yeah.
junior college, especially with lower division courses.
Can I just
Absolutely,
say
sir.
one thing? Maybe this is in the nature of kind of a response to everything that's been said, and I don't even know how well this is organized in my head, but my assessment of where we are right now is that we are at a watershed moment in the history of Sonoma State University, and of course I haven't been here that long, 11 years. So other people who have more experience than I have a lot more experience than I do. So there have been other watershed moments, but it seems to me that, you know, when it really comes down to it, we have options that involve people, and 85% of our budget is, you know, goes into the pockets or benefits of people, or options that involve, I don't know, you know, kind of tinkering on the margins to make things more efficient. And quite frankly, I think we're sort of reaching the limit on efficiency. But I think that we really are at kind of a watershed moment. You know, it would be one thing if we could receive a large state cut and also receive a large cut in enrollment. You know, then we could basically continue to act out the mission that we have in the same way that we have. But the reality is, I think many of these suggestions and many of the possibilities that we have impinge on our mission. And so my only response is, as we go forward, as we think about these things, we need to think about our mission and what every possible solution is doing to it.
Well, it feels like we might be coming to a close. Before we do that, are there any other thoughts? Or as people have them, I agree to certainly email any one of us or Susan, or we'll set up some kind of methodology. Susan, then Eduardo, closing.
I just want to thank you for having these series of town hall meetings. I think they're very valuable. I would suggest you do it not the Friday or Thursday before holidays.
I know.
That's bad timing here. But the more of these, the better. And I would suggest we might do something similar with San Rosa Junior College in our local area. In the past, that's been really valuable to see where we can find immediate synergies with our units.
It's a good observation. Eduardo?
Just to take an opportunity to make a point I'm going to be making every chance I get, which is that we really are, I think we're at a turning point that only happens every 40 years or so in an economy, in a society. And so we need to start thinking about some long-term qualitative changes to cope with the new environment. And one of the things that we haven't done in academia, and you know, we would be leaders if we made significant inroads in this regard, is engage in qualitative change in how we do what we do, technical change in a qualitative sense, where we would be able to actually achieve the same outcomes with a significant reduction of effort by doing things qualitatively differently, using new technology in the sense of combining the inputs that go into what we do in a qualitatively different way, with better design. There are some specifics that we can talk about in other forums, but it's just something that our biggest single cost obviously is direct instruction. And if we found a way to leverage our faculty resources so that we could achieve an improvement of, say, 10, 20% in terms of the learning outcomes that we could achieve with our faculty, that would really take a lot of pressure off our costs. And I'm not talking about speed up or increasing workload. I'm talking about doing things in a qualitatively different way. Some of it may include actual technology in terms of academic technology. Some of it may be simply using different pedagogies. And I think there are things out there, and I hope that we can start exploring those next semester to see what we can do in this regard.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks to my panel colleagues, Tim and Andy, Scott, Derek, Nicolette. If I don't see everyone, have a great holiday. I'm sure we'll touch base between now and the end, but thank you so much.